and they didn't reach out right away. I was talking to some other teams. Didn't really know that was going to happen, and then they just kind of came into the fold, and my eyes kind of lit up when I see that text from my agent or whatever that they're interested, and then I was almost wary of looking for red flags, in like our interview process and stuff like that. Because I knew I really wanted to go there in my heart, but I was wary of jumping the gun a little bit.
All right, guys, welcome back. Another episode to the show, Baseball Podcast. Today's episode, we have Noah Davis on of the Boston Red Sox organization, and that is a new thing. If for those who aren't familiar with Noah, if you aren't familiar though, he did spend his previous season pitching in Colorado's organization, spent some time up on the major league roster as well down in AAA. But Noah, I know you're working out with Driveline this offseason. I know things are starting to come to the close now, obviously with spring training right around the corner, but how have things been for you so far this offseason?
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for having me. This is awesome. Always love a chance to talk baseball and now talk Red Sox and stuff like that. So yeah, everything's been going great. Been over at Driveline for the off season. It's my third off season working out there at the facility in Arizona here in Scottsdale. And things have been going great, just kind of hammering along some of the same things that we've been working on the last couple of years, but taking steps forward in some of those departments. And yeah, it's just been a really enjoyable experience.
And so you said you've been working out with them for the last 3 off seasons now there at Driveline. What were some of the reasons why, I guess, you started up with Driveline compared to what you were doing previously?
Yeah, I kind of was first introduced to Driveline and some of those guys when I was over in Cincinnati in the minor leagues, and Kyle Bodie was hired as our pitching coordinator, who's now with Boston, and that's kind of my tie to Boston. And he came over and he just kind of reinvented the way that I think about the game, introduced me to modern analytics, modern throwing programs, throwing plyos for the first time, just opened my eyes to a whole new world of pitching development and pitching philosophy, and how to go about my training and how to live my life essentially. I've always been somewhat of an analytical thinker, but looking back now, it kind of feels like I had no idea what I was doing before Bodie kind of came in and showed me, hey, there's all these tools, there's all these ways to go about it. And we can actually, diagnose problems, come up with a pretty concise plan to attack those deficiencies and stuff like that. And that just kind of clicked in my head, like, oh, this is fun now. Like, this is a lot of fun. I feel like I actually can improve. I have clear goals that I'm aiming for. And I started to see the results kind of right away. So when it came to training in the off season, it just felt like the perfect fit, especially after getting traded to Colorado, kind of looking for a place to keep that same kind of mentality in terms of my development and stuff. So packed up everything, and me and my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, moved out to Scottsdale and just spent the last 3 off seasons training at Driveline, and it's been everything that I could have asked for.
So you kept mentioning a name, Kyle Bodie, and obviously he has ties with the Red Sox organization now. And I feel like we've seen over the last 2 seasons now, we've kind of seen an influx of Driveline guys, whether it's Jason Ochart on the hitting side of things, coming over from Driveline. We've seen Johnny Reyna. We've seen quite a few names come over from the ranks there at Driveline. So this might lead into my next question I have for you, but obviously you're one of the newest members of the Red Sox organization as of December when you signed as a free agent. Was that something that kind of drew you towards Boston? Was the familiarity with some of these, with the Kyles of the world and maybe the Ocharts, things like that, or what I guess drew you to the Red Sox?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different avenues that I would say that were drawing me to Boston. I grew up in Southern California, about as far away from Boston as you can get, but I grew up an Angels fan, but for some reason that Red Sox were always like my far away team that I would follow and really kind of fell in love with from afar. And I think maybe some of that had to do with Yeah, I was big playing MLB The Show when I was a kid. I remember playing MLB '06 The Show with David Ortiz on the cover, and that Red Sox team was stacked. Like, you'd play with the All-Star team in that game, and half the team is Red Sox. So maybe that's where it started, and I just kind of fell in love from afar. And then my dad actually surprised me on my 11th birthday, pulled me out of school, didn't tell me where we were going, and we just hopped on a flight to Boston to watch the Angels play at Fenway. And we were there for like 24 hours, just like a quick trip. But we went and like walked around Boston, got a tour of Fenway Park, like went and sat in a bunch of different seats at Fenway during the game. And it was like the coolest experience of my life. And, it always has held kind of a strong place in my heart since then, since I was 11 years old. And then, as I get older and I start my professional career and stuff, I create this relationship with Kyle Bodie, and he makes his way over to Boston. And just kind of seeing from afar, like, the shift in how that they go about developing pitching. I hear things from Bodie. I hear things from other guys that have played with the Red Sox organization over the last couple of years. Just felt like it was right up my alley in terms of,
philosophy, development, stuff like that. So when I hit free agency, I kind of always was thinking Boston, like if I had to pick one place, like sight unseen, Boston. And they didn't reach out right away. I was talking to some other teams, didn't really know that was going to happen. And then they just kind of came into the fold, and my eyes kind of lit up when I see that text from my agent or whatever that they're interested. And then I was almost wary of looking for red flags, in like our interview process and stuff like that. Cause I knew I really wanted to go there in my heart, but I was wary of jumping the gun a little bit. And everything that I heard in our, meetings, meeting with Justin Willard, the kind of the pitching head over there, and it was checking all the boxes. And then like they came through with their offer, and their offer was better than all the offers. And it just kind of felt like it was meant to be. So I'm still kind of pinching myself, honestly, at this point. I just feel very lucky to have this opportunity. And I feel incredibly grateful to be a part of an organization with so much history and such a winning culture.
So you kind of hit on a little bit of, obviously the relationship with Kyle was already there, and you had heard things from some other guys about, what they do with their pitching development and guys they've worked with before. For you being a pitcher, did it sway you at all, just having, with Craig Breslow being in charge of, the operations with the Red Sox and being a former pitcher, and he's been on the mound before, he's been in a clubhouse before. Does that give you any sense of like feeling of comfort, just knowing that this guy's been there before? He knows like what it's like to be on the mound. He knows about struggling in the major leagues. He knows all that. Does that move you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of the discussion in baseball over the last few years has been, with these analytical minds kind of making their way into the fold, and a lot of decisions being made using analytics and modern data, stuff like that. You kind of have seen the pendulum swift from full analytics back to kind of finding characters in the game that can bridge that gap between having been there before, what it feels like to be in a clubhouse, what it feels like to create a solid team culture, and just be able to kind of get into the head of guys who have struggled, like what does that feel like mentally? And it does bring some confidence to know that, someone like Breslow has been there and done that. And he's also up to date with everything on the analytical front. I think that I think his resume is kind of the perfect resume for someone you'd want in that position. So that was definitely appealing to me. And he reached out and sent me a text, as we were getting close to kind of finalizing a deal. And I really liked that personal touch. And, I've only heard great things about him and how he operates. So yeah, it definitely brings comfort knowing that the guy in charge has been in your shoes.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. You said that too, because I'm sure you're well aware that the fan base in Boston is extremely passionate about the baseball team and transactions, and I mean, you name it. To kind of hear a player though, kind of talk about like what you're saying in regards to, with Breslow, that just like little personal touch at the end, where I think sometimes fans kind of disconnect. They just kind of see everything so transactional. This is the player, this is the contract, boom, you move on. It's kind of nice to hear a player put a little personal touch to Breslow, because it does sometimes he comes across as that almost robotic, in his approach and how he sounds, and it's just always the same thing that is there. So it is kind of a little refreshing to kind of hear that, and I'm hopeful that when fans do listen to the show and they kind of hear that, they are making connections outside of just, hey, you know what, we have a good pitching program now, and this is what we're offering, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's always going to be a difference between that kind of forward face that you have to put out when you're in a position like that, especially with such a passionate fan base like Boston. You want transparency, but you also know that there are a lot of things working behind the scenes. So yeah, there's definitely more than meets the eye in terms of, the fan perspective and like kind of the inside baseball perspective. And that's something that, I've thought about and talked about a lot. I was actually just having a conversation with my wife about this yesterday. Like the perspective that you have when you're a fan, like when you're a kid growing up, I would look, and I remember rooting for the Angels and being like, oh, they just traded my favorite player. Like, why would they do that? Like stuff like that. And then you kind of get into baseball and you understand all the ins and outs of like contracts, the business side. It gets a little bit messy, but there's a reason for everything that's going on. And, I have pretty strong faith in my understanding. It seems like the Red Sox have been doing a great job on that front. And the perspective can be a little bit different, but I feel like I have a good understanding of how that stuff all works.
So I know you had said that you had spoken with, Justin Willard a little bit, and obviously Craig as well, but have you had a chance to talk to Andrew Bailey yet? And I feel like there's a lot of guys. We had Justin Slayton on the show, I think a month ago, and he was very vocal about his support of Andrew Bailey and how much he meant to him in his first year there in the big. So I was kind of curious if you had any like opportunities to talk to Bailey yet, and has he put together any sort of plan or what he wants to see out of you, or is that more of a Justin Willard thing?
Yeah, I had a phone call with Bailey shortly after I signed, just kind of introducing ourselves and catching up on the off season and kind of broadly talking about plans for development and philosophy with where we want to go in terms of like pitch design, pitch usage, stuff like that. And he's been a great resource for me already. I think it's been a month since I signed today, and we've got a text thread going with him and Chris Holt. Like every time I throw a bullpen, I'm sending data and video to them. And just kind of going over things and checking in on where I'm at. And I'm sure that, when I report to Fort Myers in February, that we can just kind of hit the ground running. They'll know where I'm at. They've been very responsive and very encouraging. And they speak the same language that I do, which is refreshing, kind of, I guess you would say like a younger, more enthusiastic reaction to some of the stuff that I would send them. And yeah, it's been awesome so far. I couldn't say better things about everybody that I've interacted with so far.
All right, so I want to talk about you, the pitcher, now. I saw a couple things from this offseason in regards to either videos that Driveline's uploaded, you've uploaded on Twitter/X, and I kind of wanted to ask you about a couple of them because one of them was kind of funny. Well, I did want to ask. So obviously you were like, "Hey, what am I going to do to get lefties out this year?" And there was a video of you hitting 101 on the radar. And then there was also another one where I actually have come across him before. Isaac Groffman, I think that's his name. He puts out a lot of like analytically like data driven things for pitching around kind of. I think he does it with the Cape, but it's with guys all around the league. And he had put, that he had talked to you and that you have an ideal movement plot that you're looking for. And you want to work on getting lefties out by refining your fastball and curveball and using a more vertical approach. So what kind of things have you been working on for your arsenal and I guess your pitch mix going into this year? Like what things have you kind of tweaked this offseason?
Yeah. So I mean, in my career so far, especially since kind of converting to a primary fastball, like more of a sinker profile for the fastball the last few years, That just tends to be more effective against same-handed hitters. So I've had an easier time with right-handed hitters than left-handers because of that sinker sweeper kind of profile, the east-west. So, I had been thinking about it for the last year. It hadn't really fully gotten a chance to implement it, I guess. But, working on bringing the four seam back into the fold as kind of a fastball that I can use to get lefties at the top of the zone. And then having more of a depthy breaking ball to pair with that. Kind of working on, like you said, on that vertical plane as opposed to the horizontal plane. So that, and, bringing the cutter back into the fold and potentially merging that or splitting that cutter into like a true cut fastball and like a harder kind of gyro slider, I think would help me to offset those platoon splits a little bit. So that's been kind of the focus this offseason, is just separating those pitches to where they need to be for each plan of attack for righties and lefties. And I haven't, righties, not that I've dominated, but righties, I've had a lot easier time. So I have been spending a lot more time throwing bullpens with like the left-handed dummy in the box, going through those pitch sequences that we'll be using against lefties, and just kind of working through that.
So something also that I wanted to ask you about, obviously you had just pitched in Colorado the last couple seasons in your major league time. And we had Nick Mears on this podcast last offseason, and Nick kind of, pointed something out that I think a lot of people obviously talk about, like the elevation change and all that, where like, his pitches wouldn't land in the spot that they usually do. Like it's a little off. And so Nick Mears was kind of talking about some of the difficulties and I guess challenges to overcome when pitching in Colorado compared to pitching in Fenway, for example, where he hits, his spots are different where he hits and things like that. So are you looking forward to kind of not having to pitch as much, I guess, at elevation? And obviously, how do you combat the differences where you kind of train yourself to hit certain points and pitch it differently in Colorado than you do elsewhere? Like, how do you like flip the switch back and forth?
Yeah. I mean, over the last 3 years, I've gotten pretty accustomed to pitching at altitude, and I feel like I generated a pretty good idea of what my game plan should look like at altitude. And I actually found a couple instances where I felt like the reduced movement helped me out a little bit. It helped keep some of the breaking balls on the plate a little bit longer. The hitters have a slightly different mentality when they're at altitude. They're pretty aggressive because they know that they're not necessarily going to be outstuffed by the pitcher. But I think that the biggest challenge that I faced, and this is more so in the big leagues than in AAA with Colorado, because the PCL almost everywhere is at altitude. So you're not getting the crazy fluctuation. But when you're pitching in Colorado and your fastball is moving 12 inches, and then you go, like we would fly over to Washington, and now the fastball is moving 22 inches, like you're kind of standing on the mound sitting there like, how do I throw the ball where I want to? Like it's moving way more. Your sights have to change, and you just don't really have a great idea of where to start things. So I think the challenge was really in just going back and forth from altitude to sea level. Because when you just become accustomed to throwing at altitude, your baseline just kind of shifts, and you find a way to get it done. And obviously your stuff's not going to be nearly as nasty in a vacuum. But I found that it helped me to kind of lock in, work on my location and sequencing, and it presented a challenge that you kind of work through. And I think in the end, it's a great training tool to develop you into being a better pitcher. So I'm looking forward to not having to bounce around too much. I know we might go to Colorado at some point, but the International League doesn't really have much altitude. So if I'm in Worcester, then that's not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting back to an even playing ground, I guess.
Yeah, I do hear some guys that kind of come in just around the International League are like, ball really flies there in Worcester. You got the wall in right field, and sometimes the ball does kind of sail out of there on some days. But I feel like some of you guys that pitch in the PCL, man, like kudos to you guys. The ball absolutely flies out there in Vegas and El Paso and all of those spots out there. And I feel like you guys are definitely you went through a gauntlet. I like to say it's like SEC baseball a little bit, where it's like, you guys went through a gauntlet out there. So I did want to bring it back to as well. Obviously I brought up that tweet that you did of you hitting 101. I do see, I'm not sure if you're familiar with SoxProspects.com. They're fabulous what they do. They make player profiles for every player in the Red Sox system, and you got a page already. So obviously it says like some of your arsenal that they have on here. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. You got a fastball, slider, curveball, changeup, and then it says your fastball you live around 93 to 95. Has there been any tweaks with the velocity, or how's that looking, I guess, going into the season?
Yeah, so I guess that's a caveat I should have probably included on that tweet. I kind of sent it out recklessly. That was a 4-ounce baseball, so it wasn't. I
figured you weren't throwing 101, but
yeah. I'm not gonna probably show up sitting 100 in camp, but I do expect the velocity to tick up a little bit, especially just kind of fine tuning some of the mechanical stuff and maybe reducing the fastball usage and just an overall different philosophy in terms of targets and stuff like that. But yeah, I've generally been around that 93, 95 range the last few years. Had some stints where it's more in that like 94, 96, touching 97 a few times. But my biggest strength has never been an overpowering fastball. I've kind of relied mostly on movement with those off-speed pitches and trying to get as much movement as I can on the sinker. But yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to that mix that you mentioned there is I'm throwing a cutter as well. Been throwing that for the last couple of years, and I think that that's going to be kind of a big, cornerstone for my arsenal, something to build around. If I'm looking at that movement plot, that cutter is kind of right in the middle to bridge the sinker and the sweeper, and kind of sets everything else up. Especially, we're going to try to move towards throwing the fastball a little bit less. So I think using that cutter and maybe developing it into 2 different variations, I think that's going to be pretty key for us moving forward.
And I know that there's a running joke on this podcast, and Chris obviously knows what it is. But every single guy that we talk to in the Red Sox system, they all throw sweepers. The Red Sox love a good sweeper. So do the Yankees. I know both those organizations are always telling their guys that they want them to throw a sweeper. Is that something that they've talked to you about, or is your slider a little sweeperish? I guess. But I know you're trying to get more a vertical approach, and I know that's a little more horizontal. But is that something that they've talked to you about at all?
Yeah, I mean, I like it's basically a sweeper. It could easily be tagged as a sweeper, and I don't know, maybe they just asked me what I wanted it to be tagged and I said slider, but it's basically a sweeper profile, is the primary breaking ball that I've been using the last few years. And it's over the last year, it kind of developed more into that true sweeper profile. But yeah, I mean, I think Bailey does a great job. Everything that I've heard with like sweeper guys, sinker, cutter, kind of seems like a mold that he's familiar with, which was another thing that kind of brought me towards Boston as well. Seeing that he's familiar with the type of pitcher that I am and has had success developing those guys and putting him in a position to succeed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to just developing that stuff even further.
So you report to spring training here in February. Pitchers and catchers all report in just a short time from now. You have an NRI to big league camp. Obviously, you've spent some time in the majors the past couple of years, so it's not really a surprise there. But for you being a new guy to the organization, and we were kind of talking off air, you knew some guys a little bit from playing in the past, you knew some coaches, whatever it is, but for you being new to the organization, what kind of things are you looking forward to in your first spring training with the Red Sox?
It will be a new experience for me, kind of walking in. My first big league spring training was my first spring training with the Rockies. So I guess it will be kind of similar to that in terms of kind of showing up and nobody knows who you are. You don't know anybody. There are some big names walking around. And that's probably what I would say I'm looking forward to the most is, being able to spend time with and pick the brains of some of these elite arms that have been here in Boston and the ones that have been recently acquired, talking to Crochet, talking to Walker Buehler, Giolito, Houck. There's plenty of big league experience, a lot of big league success in that clubhouse. And I think that that's something that I'm just really looking forward to is being able to spend time with those guys, see how they work, see what their thought process is on kind of every front. And I'm just looking forward to learning a lot. I've spent the last few years really trying to dive into the concepts of development. I think I would like to eventually be in some sort of developmental role when my playing career is over. So I think I picked a great organization on the coaching staff and player side in terms of learning a lot and kind of translating that into my own training. And then, as I move into a different role, hopefully later on, being able to gain a lot of knowledge from all of that.
You mentioned a couple of those names earlier, just with new guys to the organization, obviously along with like the Houks and the Cutter Crawfords and Lucas Giolito coming back. But, obviously they've added Crochet this offseason. They've added Walker Buehler, Roldis Chapman. I guess Liam Hendricks is technically new because he hasn't made his debut yet with the Red Sox, a big league team. So you have all these like big names like joining the mix. Does that excite you as a player, just seeing like the team go out and add as much as they have to the pitching side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially in this free agency, kind of being able to have some options in terms of where I wanted to go. My number one focus was development, going somewhere where they could help me to become the best pitcher that I can be. And then winning. I want to be a part of a championship team and contribute in any way that I can. And I think, maybe it comes off in free agency a little bit daunting when you're joining a team with that much kind of star power. And I kind of viewed it as like a learning experience and something that can help to push me further along. But yeah, these guys that are around are legit big league arms, a lot of success. So it's pretty exciting to know that, if I can become the best version of myself and hopefully make my way up to Boston and contribute to a team, that the moment I walk in the doors at Fenway, we're there to win. Like the focus is on winning a championship, winning a World Series. So to be able to have that opportunity to contribute to something special like that, I think is something that I'm not taking for granted whatsoever.
All right, Chris, I got a few questions left. I'm going to shoot some random things here. If you got anything to kind of head in that direction.
No, I'm ready for the one-offs.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about you, obviously training and all you've done, like, pitching wise this off season and what you're kind of about. But I want to know what you're about a little bit off the field. So when you're not at Driveline training, when you're not, pitching, you got an off day, like what are you doing with your free time?
Yeah. I just got married last week.
Congrats, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So life's looking a little different now. I mean, spending time with my wife, spending time with our dog. We got an old English bulldog that we adopted last year. So that's what I spend most of my free time doing. But I also like to, hit the golf course. I like to play as much as I can, especially during the off season. And I'm not good, but good enough to be invited, not good enough to break the course record, So that's something I really enjoy doing. Really interested in music. I listen to a lot of music. My dad was in a punk band for 25 years, and that was his job when I was growing up. So I've been pretty heavily involved in all things music for a while. And yeah, that's, I kind of just bounce back and forth between those things. When I'm back home in California, I spend time at the beach quite a bit. I really like body surfing and just spending time out there. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, I would say.
What was the name of your dad's band?
It was called Guttermouth.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit raunchy, honestly. I don't know. Yeah, it could get me in trouble one day. Actually, maybe I should stop telling people about that.
We'll throw that one on the resume, but
yeah,
it is what it is. I got two follow-ups on that, by the way. One, I know you probably don't know a lot of the names around like the org yet and kind of with the Red Sox, but if there's a guy and you'll see him, he's a redhead, he's a Texan, his name's Hunter Dobbins. If he asks you to golf, you politely decline. He's a scratch golfer. It's insane. Every story I've heard about him on the golf course is that guy should probably, if he's quitting baseball anytime soon, get on the PGA Tour. So be careful on that one. Just tread lightly.
There's that.
Yeah.
Plus, he kicked that 40-yard field goal too that he put on Twitter. What was it, last week or 2 weeks ago? Was it like 40 or 30 yards, whatever it was?
Yeah, he's a weird athlete. He doesn't look like it. But he's like a freak athlete. I don't know how or why, but he is. So just be careful if he asks you to go golfing. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I'll go with him, but I'll ask for a bunch of strokes. Might need some help.
See, but he's the kind of guy too, though, that's gonna be like, you know what, like whoever loses these next 3 holes got to go buy dinner or something. So as long as you're okay with that, being the new guy, then go. But just trying to warn you right now.
Yeah, I appreciate the heads up.
We're big Hunter Dobbins guys. He's a good dude, but great golfer. And then 2, I am going to say I got married this offseason as well. It's been definitely an interesting change. What kind of things have you noticed so far? I guess you're brand new to it, actually. I might follow up with that question like months down the line. Be like, what has changed from your schedule right now? Because I have some like less video game time and a few other things, but we'll follow up on that one.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. I want to ask about a video that I saw from Pitching Ninja. And for some reason, when I saw your name and you got signed, I like searched. I'm like, is this the guy that got his hat blown off on a comebacker off the mound? And it was you. So I wanted to follow up. I want to know what a thought process is seeing a ball fly back and literally knocking your hat off your head, which I've never seen before like that, especially from behind. It didn't hit the brim, hit literally the back of your hat. So that one is crazy. How long does that take you to kind of get comfortable again back on the mound after seeing that happen?
Well, honestly, like I remember that happening, in real time. And I had, my nerves were going crazy because it was, I think, the 2nd or 3rd inning of my first big league start. So plenty of things on my mind, to kind of keep my head a little bit scrambled. But yeah, took my hat right off. And I honestly forgot about it after about an inning. Didn't even remember that it happened. And then I go back to my phone after the game and like my Twitter is just going crazy. Like it had already like gone viral before I even got back into the clubhouse. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird that happened. And then, it's made the rounds. I see it every once in a while on the Explore page on Instagram. But yeah, those comebackers come off the bat, and I think any pitcher will tell you this, but it's coming back at you and it almost feels like it's happening in slow motion. Like you feel like you see it forever, but you don't have time to move your body that much. It's like you see it for a long time. And then I just ducked my head out of the way. Probably not the smartest move to turn the back of my head towards the ball. But there's not much thinking going on. You're just in survival mode at that point. But yeah, it caught like the back of my hair and just kind of pulled my hat right off. And thankfully we got an out and went right to the second baseman. So
I've never seen that like to this day other than that time, because obviously like it didn't hit like the brim. I've seen it hit the brim on some guys, like they'll turn and they'll hit that, but never seen it like take off the back. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild slow-mo replay from the side angle.
Oh yeah, and obviously you got a lot of lettuce back there too, so I don't know if that helped or not, but
yeah. And they had the Sports Clips sign in the background at T-Mobile Park, and it was a lot of people pointed that out in the comments and stuff, and it was pretty good product placement there.
Oh yeah, no, that was. I'm glad you're good, by the way, that didn't like seriously hurt you, because that could have like been bad. But
yeah, absolutely.
So I got 2 questions left. They're both very random, so I apologize in advance. You grew up in California, and you said you grew up an Angels fan, I think you said earlier. So growing up, who were some of your favorite athletes? And it doesn't just have to be baseball; it can be all around sports.
Yeah, I'm pretty much a one-trick pony in terms of baseball. I'm a baseball nerd. Always kind of have been. So I've loved a lot of different players throughout my lifetime. Some of the guys that I grew up watching, obviously Vladimir Guerrero was kind of the stud for the Angels for a long time. But I always found myself liking kind of more random guys, like former Red Sox Orlando Cabrera was like my favorite player on the team for a while. And then I had a Myceris Torres jersey for some reason.
Wow.
Like just really liked him. But then you got like kind of the franchise greats like Tim Salmon, Garrett Anderson, Troy Gloss. I was a big fan. And then like on the pitching side, I always liked watching Jared Weaver throw. Garrett Richards was somebody that I was trying to emulate for a long time because he was kind of one of those first guys that really was throwing gas as a starting pitcher. And that I found that pretty appealing. And, the list goes on and on. Francisco Rodriguez, Mike Napoli, like everybody. I was like the biggest Angels fan for a long time.
And how does one, growing up there in California, and I feel like nowadays, present day, I feel like the Dodgers own that area for, obviously for obvious reasons, obviously with winning World Series recently and, spending a ton of money. But how did one choose back in the day, like who to root for?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, the Angels were pretty hot and the Dodgers were okay, not doing anything crazy. But the Angels were in the playoffs almost every year, and Angel Stadium was about a 15-minute drive from Huntington Beach where we were at. So I would say 90% of my friends and people that I knew were Angels fans over Dodger fans. And it was kind of weird if you were a Dodgers fan, and then you kind of see that shift over the last few years. But I think it just comes down to it was cheaper, easier to get to the stadium. Just accessibility, I guess. We would go all the time to Angel Stadium.
Okay. Yeah. I'm curious because I feel like nowadays, maybe like, with the younger generation growing up now, like if I was in grade school or whatever, and I'm learning baseball and I live in, the LA area, I feel like I'd probably gravitate more towards the Dodgers just because, they're winning and, they have all the all-star players, and obviously you have Mike Trout now in Anaheim, but I just feel like it was way different back then. I just feel like you said, some of those guys, I loved those Angels teams. I was a big Sean Figgins fan for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just like that scrappy. Yeah, he's just one of those scrappy guys that you just like, I like that guy. I don't know why, I just do. All right, last question here. Are you a food guy at all?
I love food, that's for sure. I don't know how like cultured I am in my food. But yeah, I love food, and and I don't know if this is where you're leading it to, but I've heard some things about, restaurants in Boston and Massachusetts that, I'm looking forward to trying, and I don't really have any specifics. So if you have any recommendations, I'm definitely down to give it a shot. But, I spent a summer over in Cape Cod and kind of got familiar with some of the local, delicacies, I guess. And yeah, I love food.
Chris, we should start. We got to take notes on that one. Especially a new guy to a new org. It's like, especially Boston, it's like that we're familiar with. Like, hey, let's give him some recommendations. But I was going the other end of the food thing here, and I am a big fan of, I guess, chain restaurants. I don't know why. I'm very passionate on my chain restaurants, of the places I love compared to places I don't like. So I need a Mount Rushmore out of you. So I need a top 4 restaurant chains, and they can be fast food or sit down.
Okay. Mount Rushmore. So I'm just going to put 4 of them up there.
No particular order.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to, this will probably upset some people. I'm going to say from Southern California, I'm going to put In-N-Out on this chain. Yeah, I'm going to have to. And when I consider everything, consider the price point, especially when I was growing up, the price point was insane. I could get a hamburger for like $2. But yeah, I'm going to put In-N-Out on there. And this is a basic one. I'm just going to say Chipotle, because I eat Chipotle probably at least twice a week. Just old, reliable. It's always good. It's
always
like
consistent.
You know what you're paying for. Yeah, just reliable. I'll take that all day. And then these other ones are going to be tough because I want to kind of mix it up a little bit. If I'm sticking to, I'm a big PF Chang's guy, honestly.
Ooh,
I don't know why. Like when I'm on Uber Eats or whatever, I'm in a place where kind of unfamiliar with some of the restaurants, like I'll always go to PF Chang's, and kind of similar to Chipotle, I know what I'm getting. It's a little price point up from there, but when I'm feeling when my pockets are a little bit thicker, I guess I'll bump from Chipotle up to PF Chang's.
Okay. I don't hate it.
And I feel like I'm blowing this. I feel like there's got to be a clear answer that I'm just
There's been
missing.
some basic ones. Every guy is giving me 3 of the same ones, and you've said one of the 3.
Chipotle, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to do a good one.
Easy ones right now, though, that you're omitting from this list.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I'm just kind of losing. I've spent a lot of time in the PCL. There's not a lot going on. So I'm thinking of things like Outback. I'm thinking of like Chili's, stuff like that.
I am shocked you didn't give me Chick-fil-A. I'm going to be honest.
Oh, that's the 4th one, Chick-fil-A.
I knew it.
I don't know how I could forget it. I just literally had Chick-fil-A 2 days ago, and same with Chipotle. I'm just kind of alternating between those. So yeah, Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
Clear choice.
I didn't want to give you one of yours, but it's just like it's been Chick-fil-A, it's been Texas Roadhouse or Longhorn Steakhouse, and Chipotle has been like everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to be too basic, but you're right. Like, if I'm searching for something, Chick-fil-A is the answer, 100%.
All right. Yeah. So one thing to do that you need to learn going up to the Northeast, obviously you've been to the Cape before, not a lot of chains, not a whole lot out there compared to like the South. And I think California's probably got a few more chains than the Northeast, but Worcester, there's like nothing really there that's really crazy other than I know all the guys go to Ruth Chris in the city, which is, everybody knows where Ruth Chris is, but you kind of know what you're getting there. But Boston, man. Oh, spectacular. It's like you go to the North End, Italian, you go Back Bay, you got like, I don't know. It's like you can find food anywhere. So you shouldn't have any trouble once you get to Boston. All right.
I'll say though, a handful of the places that you didn't mention, the Woo Sox, if you end up in Worcester, was like a weekly, like would have Chick-fil-A. They would have like, there would be random, like, was it Outback they had, or was it was Outback, right?
Yeah, it was Outback.
Yeah, they would Outback. They feed you really well in Worcester. The food is the spread is ridiculous every time, whether it's them making the food in-house and it comes on down there, or it's the Chipotle, all that stuff. They feed you guys pretty good. So
awesome. That's good to hear.
All right, Noah, you gave us a ton of your time, man. We definitely appreciate you hopping on. Obviously, wishing you the best of luck coming into your first spring training with the Red Sox, and obviously wherever you start out 2025. Nothing but the best, but thank you so much for hopping on.